Hello, hello. Hi, Toby. I am so excited that you're here today for this interview. And I was going to start by saying that, well, first of all, you are a medium and you've
Yes.
been doing this work professionally for 22 years. So we have a lot to learn from you today. I'm super excited to just get in there, ask questions, and hear some of your
Yeah.
stories because I'm sure you have been through so much when it comes to spirit.
Definitely.
And
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm a working medium too, which has always been my actual career, not like maybe a side project or anything. So I've done it professionally, like, full time
Yeah,
for quite a while.
yeah, that's awesome and
Yeah.
incredible, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, I first became aware of you when I want to say at this point, I think it was during the pandemic, maybe like 5 years ago, that you were doing a giveaway on social media and I entered and won. So I don't know if you remember that.
That's cool. I'm like,
So
I don't.
yeah, I know. So it was around my birthday, and my mom's name was Janet, and two people won the giveaway, and it was me and somebody named Janet.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, that is so my mom pulling some strings, and then I got to have a reading with you, and it was incredible. I mean, it blew me away, and it inspired me to step more into my work. And
cool.
so I just really, really appreciated that and just always
Yes.
remembered it. So yeah, I had to give you a little
Oh,
shout
I
out at the
appreciate that.
beginning.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
always get feedback from people. So, I mean, sometimes you get like a testimonial or whatever, but you don't always get feedback from people. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just start out. I'm really curious what led you to this work or when you were first aware that you had mediumship abilities and what
Okay.
that looked like for you.
Yeah. So I'm 53 next month. And for me, I was very aware of spirit as a child. And I saw spirit sometimes, but I'm not visual. So, I mean, when I say I'm not visual, it's like aphantasia. Like I see no pictures in my mind, which is really unusual for psychic mediums. Usually are
Yeah.
hearing and seeing, and actually, I'm extremely telepathic, but with no visual whatsoever. I can describe visual details very specifically, but I don't see them, which is so weird for people. People are like, "What is that like?" Because I guess only 2% of the population doesn't see. So for me as a child, I saw a spirit. I knew they were there. I remember like an Indian in my closet died every night. I actually do have a native guide. Um, and they just never were. I mean, I remember hearing from a good friend of mine that's been like my best friend since kindergarten, but we fell, out of touch. And she said, "Do you remember like when you were a kid, like all the spirit stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah." I just remember nobody would spend the night at my house
Oh, really?
because I was always like pointing them out, and they'd call their mom to come home. You
Oh,
but it was never weird for me. And she said I went up to the crawl space, which is creepy anyway. I had a crawl space in my like a little door that opened in my
oh
wall,
yeah.
my bedroom, and it's just like is dark, muddy in there under the stairs. And I opened it up and I was like, "Do you see them all in there?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Okay, let's go jump on the trampoline," And then, and Spirit also trans-channeled through my older brother to me, my guides and his guides, which was an experience. I remember it happening often when I was a child.
Wow.
And um, I mean, my brother would just like slump down and then he was somebody else and
Wow.
telling me things that I needed to know
Yeah.
about about growing up in the household I grew up, about adopting and not adopting certain beliefs. Um, and so that was like kind of a really cool experience. And I really, so for me, I really think I'm not going to say I lost it. I just focused on other things,
Yeah.
school, sports, whatever. And then I had a lot of intense paranormal experiences in my teens, like including, that's my cat, everybody, in case you hear somebody You hear this sound in the background. She's running the rails right now. Um, Including like when I was 17 with my older brother, who's 7 years older, and his girlfriend at the time, like an entire RV that we were staying in. We were visiting my grandma, and it was my step grandpa's RV, and he was in spirit. The whole thing shaking, like knocking all the way around it, lights going off and on. So, really intense paranormal experiences that actually turned out to be my people. I found out years later, but they were letting me know you were forgetting about the spirit world,
Mm.
just letting you know it's still there, just letting you know. I'm like, maybe in a
Loud-
less scary way.
Yeah, I was gonna say loud and clear.
It was there. But so in my 20s, I went to school for business, got a degree in economics, became a stockbroker, just went about my merry way. And then my dad died when I was 25.
Mm.
And so that really changed a lot of things for me. I didn't quit my career right there, but about a year after he died, it was so traumatic for me because he was my person that I got sick, like autoimmune, adult autoimmune, Hashimoto's, celiac disease. Went through a whole thing with my health for about 5 or 6 years. And but during that time, I was off of work and I ended up having to get fired. I was on disability because I was so sick. My family didn't know what was wrong with me. I couldn't eat without
Mhm.
getting sick, and I lost like 40 pounds. And they were like, nobody could, no doctors could tell me. And it actually turned out I diagnosed myself like online, like
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, this celiac disease. I know it is. That I got tested, gene tested, stopped eating gluten and dairy, and suddenly I could eat food again. But no doctor ever told me that. Like it was back in 2000 ish to 2021 ish, or sorry, 2001 ish.
Yeah.
So back then, it wasn't as common as it is
Yeah.
now. It would be the first thing they do now, I'm sure. But anyway, my mom and I opened up a metaphysical store in downtown Littleton, and we had that for 5 years. It was called Sage Moon, and so I went into that. Uh, I'd always done tarot cards. Even I got my first deck at like I think it's 12, around there, between 11 and 13, I'd say. And I always did cards, and I always knew cards. And so I was like, I'll do the readings. We'll have this metaphysical shop, and then it really honestly just kind of ballooned from there. But what happened was I had a medium that would come into the shop. She did readings. She was English, lovely. And then a couple years into it, she moved. She had to move to Minnesota. And so I would say that was when, even though I was already psychic and doing psychic readings and doing tarot readings, uh, my mediumship channel really opened. It like blasted open.
Oh, cool.
I was meditating. Spirit was moving me completely, like while I was meditating. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, what are my arms doing? It was really kind of weird at first, right? I was just like,
Yeah.
what? Um, and I really from there, is like I went to do a normal reading, and all these people would come in from the other side, and I would be able to validate them. And it was like, oh my God, I remember like one of the first readings was this gal, and I was like, I've got this guy here. He's from Montana, and he says he's your uncle, and you have his fishing pole. She's like, oh my God, that's my uncle from Montana. I have his fishing pole. And I was like, oh wow, that was weird. Like, because I never set out to do mediumship.
Okay.
It just is one of the things. I mean, obviously I did it at a soul level, but not at a human level. Yeah.
So you're self-taught.
I did attend Arthur Finlay for
Mm.
trance,
Oh,
and
cool.
essentially had a really good tutor that told me do it your own way, go home and do it your own way, which was one of the best things that somebody could have said to me. um, and I really am. I mean, I did do some development classes, but nothing really resonated with me, and it was really clear my spirit guides and my higher self wanted me to do it my own way.
That's beautiful. And I think the best way to develop is with spirit anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean to get going and stuff, but there really is that like one-on-one with spirit. And I love how mediumship kind of came to you is what I hear in your story. Like it just
Yeah.
started to, yeah, that's so
Yeah.
neat. And so it sounds like your mom was really open, and I'm sure that was helpful
Yeah.
in opening up to your gifts. Was that always the case? It sounds like with you and your brother when you're younger.
Yeah.
Um,
So my guides told me not to tell my parents.
oh,
And not in a weird way. It never came across as like, it was more like they're not going to understand and they're going to squash it.
mhm,
And so I didn't really share any of that with my parents.
mhm.
I had my brother, and we both had like a lot of experiences. And my parents were never religious. Um, they never, I don't even remember him being spiritual. And my mom was along for the ride. She was like, we opened on her 70th birthday, closed on her 75th birthday, and it was fun. It was like we both had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool. I love
She
that.
really developed. She was really into all of the channelings and all the extraterrestrial channelings and all of the like Cryon. She loved all of that stuff. So she
My
was,
dad took me to Cryon, so I've
yeah,
been there. I've experienced that, and that's really cool too, to
yeah,
like be in the same room and feel something like that happen.
yes.
Yeah,
I've
that's
seen
really
Cryon
cool.
live too. Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool.
oh, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, and my dad took me to Sylvia Brown back in but he was always kind of into that stuff. So, that helps, I think, to
yeah,
have parents who are really open
yeah,
and yeah, so that's really neat.
yeah,
Um, and so now here you are, you've been doing it professionally and for a full-time living for almost 23 years.
yeah.
What would you say is I guess just one thing to focus on that you've learned all these years later doing this work? Um, what stands out as what might have happened for you in your growth in mediumship from where you started to where you are now in this work?
Um, I would say, the
That's a
more
big
you
question
know,
because I'm sure so much has changed. So,
so much has changed.
yeah.
But so much has stayed the same. And I think what I have really learned is that I am never in control of it. And it is different every time. It's like we show up and we are the medium, but like anything you have, any preconceived stuff, it just, you know, and you kind of come full circle on that. I think after doing it for so long, I mean, I knew that lesson early on, but really, and the trust part, the trust, and also you don't control it.
Yeah.
And also, the more you know, the less you know.
Yes. And I think those are very wise words.
Yeah,
Like, absolutely.
yeah,
Um, And so, having done this for so many years, is there a takeaway with like self-care or a way that you take really good care of yourself to support this work? Or what can
yeah,
you, anything that stands out in that? Because I feel like I've heard this from other mediums, and I think just doing it myself, there's been a lot of growth and change in like how I take care of myself to show
yeah,
up and do this work. So,
yeah. You have to. Yeah.
yeah,
So for me, I was caregiver for my mom and also working full time, and it frazzled me. And I'm actually this June will be 2 years since her passing. But after she passed, and then I moved, I actually ended up in a mold situation and then had to move, a black mold situation, then had to move again. And essentially, if you don't self care, I mean, spirit uh, was very clear that I needed to reset, that I needed to take time off, that I needed to lighten my schedule a little bit. And for me, it's like, oh, okay, that's easy. I'll do that. But it's not really easy. Like when you're used to doing it all the time, and then you are disconnected from spirit in that way because you're used to being so connected. But I did end up taking time off, sometimes a month at a time, because my body was not able to handle the nervous system taxation that comes with doing this work.
yeah.
I mean, it's different for everybody, but it really affects my nervous system.
Yeah. I know, I feel like there's so much unknowns to what it really does to us physically.
Oh,
What
yeah.
yeah, what
Got I've got a thyroidectomy. Every person I know almost that is a medium has thyroid disease, almost, or autoimmune, or
Mhm.
it's really super common. I always say
Yeah.
I'm allergic to being a human.
Um, yeah. So time off, it sounds like you just kind of trust spirit when it's like, hey, it's time to disconnect, take care of
Yeah,
yourself. That's a really helpful thing.
yeah.
Is there, yeah.
I think the other thing is, and I've done this so many times and I've had so many people. I don't really attract this much anymore, as much as I did when I was early on, but you can't take people personally.
Yeah.
I mean, some people, honestly, I remember doing a reading. I don't know how, this was probably maybe around 2010. So maybe about 5 years into, or into specifically into mediumship for me. Uh, I remember this guy, and he just was, at a group reading. He's just all like, and I'm like, okay, I've got this mom and dad here. I always remember the ones that stand out. I remember the evidence, which I don't remember most readings, but the ones that stand out, because you tell the story over and over to people. This was the story of don't be this client. But it was like, I've got this mom and dad. I said, they've got a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I'm like, this is specific enough. Go.
Pretty specific. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, that's my mom and dad. And then he's looking at his wife. He's convinced that this whole thing is a setup.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I give him all sorts of evidence. And I don't remember the rest of the evidence, but it was very specific, just boom, boom, boom. And you could tell like he was resisting me, but also was like trying to figure out, like, how does this work? How is she doing this? And then I said, your dad is showing me a dipstick, like you just changed your oil. And he's like, no. And I was like, well, if that's the case, that you haven't just changed your oil, I would check it. Then I moved on to the next thing. And I find out later that he lied. He had changed his oil right before he came to that group
Oh,
reading.
yeah.
And I think his wife, or the owner of the place that I was doing the event at, told me. And so it was like, would tell that story to people, like, don't be that person. Don't fight me.
Yeah.
Don't say no when it's a yes. It's exhausting for you and for me. And a lot
Yeah.
of times spirit's calling you out anyway. And I know you're lying to me. I didn't at that time though with that gentleman. So um, I think not taking people personally makes it easier and better. And I almost never do in the moment, because I think it's more later when
Mhm.
you get done and you're like recounting it, and you're like, God, they were really not very nice to me, like, and and I've learned to be like, that just comes with the territory.
And they're lost opportunity, really,
Really, truly,
Yeah. Mhm.
truly. Usually for me, usually spirit gets them within the first few pieces of evidence, where they're like,
Yeah.
and then they stop fighting me, because they're
Yeah.
like, there's no way she could have known that. And then it just makes it smoother
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
But I think that is another piece that's actually self-care for me,
Oh,
is
yeah.
I show up with a commitment to do my best, no matter who it is, and that is all I can control.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I hear you, and I'm also hearing, like, on a larger scale, it's like people pleasing and like taking that out of the equation of this work because it we're just showing up, we're working for spirit, and like however they take it and process it or react in the moment is kind of on them. And
Right.
like we're just working from that integrity place and doing our best. And
Right.
yeah, sometimes it happens, but I love that story. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
a funny
kind
one, but
Yes. Kind of in that same vein, what do you think people get wrong about mediumship or what I'm sure you've heard it all at this point, but what do you think is like a big um I guess just something that's like a disservice or completely wrong about mediumship?
I think one of the biggest things, and because I'm also a psychic and I also do psychic work, soul path and life path and psych and just straight psychic
Mhm.
pathway stuff, I get people that want to do this crossover thing where they
Mm.
want to bring in all their loved ones and then they want their loved ones to tell them all the information. And it's like, that's just, and then they're getting frustrated because they feel like their loved ones would tell them. I'm
Mhm.
like, my guides like censor the shit out of my dad. Like they don't let him tell me stuff all the time because I'm not meant to know.
Right.
So I think because a medium can connect easily to your loved ones doesn't mean that your loved ones are going to give you the answers
Mm.
for everything in your life. They will
Yeah.
give you some answers, like they always do. They
Yeah.
come, especially commenting on things going on in the family, if somebody's been in the hospital or had a surgery or somebody just graduated or there's a big milestone. But as far as spirit telling you what to do, that's
Yeah.
not very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And it's kind of like redirecting to go within a lot too. Sometimes when the readings are that like seeking outside, it's like,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, when I do psychic readings, I usually am reading the most probable timeline and that they're on based on the energy and what their thoughts and choices are at the time. And I'm also tapping in, if you want a different result, here's what your guides say you have to change, or your higher self says needs to be adjusted. This is where you're attracting this unwanted thing instead of this wanted thing. So putting it back on the person, you know,
yeah. And then do you find sometimes people don't want to hear
oh
certain
yeah,
things? Yeah.
no, they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's like pulling teeth.
Hmm.
People think they want a psychic reading, and I would say there's a lot of times where people are like, ugh. And then later they're like, oh my God, you were right about everything. I want to book another reading. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you were not very nice to me taking that information. But again,
Yeah.
I'm a Pisces, so I'm a little sensitive, but
Yeah.
it's just you give it and you move on, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
A little bit of tougher skin, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, so shifting gears a little bit, I always am just so curious what you have gleaned or learned in your communication with spirit about the other side. What has maybe surprised you, or how has your perception of what happens when we die changed? Or what does that kind of look like for you as you've done this work?
Yeah. I think when I started and when I was younger, and I think a lot of people feel this way, I would perceive the other side as a place. It's this place, it's over here, and these people are here in this place. And now I perceive the other side as a expansion of consciousness and frequency. So it's not, because there's no time and space, right? There's actually no location. It is actually just your frequency increasing, and your consciousness expanding, right?
Mhm.
So I think that would probably be my biggest one, is that I understand now. It used to be so hard for me to be like, my dad could be talking to me, talking to my brother in Iowa, and doing his own thing on the other side. It would be like, wow, that's so. And I still use that example for people because they're like, well, what if they reincarnate? Or what about this? They're always throwing things out. And I'm like, it's pretty much unlimited. Like, so we're just thinking through our human brain and
Mhm.
our physicality, this
Yeah.
little earth place that we're at, um, and the frequency that we're at now. But when they're increasing their frequency, it's becoming unlimited, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also the idea of not being away from somebody, that part is so hard for us because they seem away from us because we're not experiencing them in the same ways when they were human,
Mhm.
but that they're not actually ever away from us because we're on the other side too.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. And is there like a common, I don't know, thread or message that you do notice over and over from the spirit world with your clients? Is there anything that sticks out? And even in particular, these days? Because I feel like somebody who's been doing readings as long as you, have you noticed there's like collective shifts? And so maybe the advice or um, insight has shifted and changed to what we're moving through now as a collective or, as,
Yeah.
yeah.
The spirit lately has been giving a lot of advice about living from the inside out and not the
Mm,
outside in. Like for people, like not so like if you came as a soul to do something and then you're letting the outside influence you to the point that you can't actually stay in balance, or you're angry or frustrated, or have no hope, or whatever the negative emotion is, it's taking you away from well, being happy in life, but also being able to be productive or be able to achieve what you wanted to, especially spiritual people that are needing to hold a certain, I think, vibration for the
mhm,
planet. um, I think one thing I hear over and over, I mean, all of us hear this because it is the healing aspect of mediumship, but that they're not, it didn't matter, and not, it doesn't matter in a negative way, but it doesn't matter that we had an argument, or it doesn't matter that you weren't there when I passed. Like everything is absolutely divine. And there's really actually nothing left unsaid, even though I died maybe tragically and unexpectedly. Um, and you feel things are unsaid. I always tell people that is your work to do, though, because you need to work through that with somebody. But for them, they don't hold on to any of that, none of it. And that is definitely a really common theme, I think.
mhm. Have you gotten any insight about spirituality or perceptions of God doing this work? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So it is the internal thing again, that God is us and in us, and we are all collectively God,
Mhm,
like we're God experiencing ourselves. And I think, even not being raised religious, even as a young child, I would go back and forth between thinking God was internal or external, like somewhere sitting up on a throne, or whatever. And it's just not. It's
yeah.
like that we are. I always say, like, if we all held hands together, that's God.
Mm.
Everybody together.
Yeah. I started to say, I feel like I love this question and I always want to ask it because I always think people have it so wrong when, like, I grew up in the South in Texas.
Yeah.
So sometimes if people are really religious, they have opinions about the work we do. And it's so interesting because I feel like I'm more aligned with God than ever before in that same way that you speak of. I was informed by the spirit world in this way when I would connect with loved ones in spirit and they would start showing me like every cell in their body lighting up with
Mhm.
this like God particle and like that they were God, that they were God and it would show up because I'm very visual. So that's when I started to get it. And then it
Yeah.
was like over and over through many readings that and of course on my own and with my own guides, but it was really doing the work that I was just like blown away. Proof of heaven on earth and like we are all got the same thing as what you're saying and it's like
Right.
wow
Right.
that blew me away doing this work because I
Right.
think going into it I didn't have that same perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we come here and we do this, like a horse with blinders.
Yeah.
We're like, oh
Mhm.
wait, I forgot I was really powerful.
Mhm. Yes, it's like that idea of our soul being so conscious and big and massive and like being squeezed into our little human experience here. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I feel like sometimes readings are like just the tip of the iceberg of what we can kind of like
Right. Yeah.
bring in and chat about. And then, yeah, we're talking to people who also are like, wait, time doesn't exist? Like,
Yeah. It's hard because I'm extremely
yeah.
esoteric and I always have been. So, and I, I don't know why this is the case, but I would say 80% of my clients have never had a reading.
Oh,
So it is like I am getting absolute newbies, and spirit's very clear, and it really is my higher self. My higher self is very clear about what I'm meant to say and not meant to say. I get information, with somebody where they're like, don't go all the way down the rabbit hole. They're
Yeah.
not ready for that. Bite-sized pieces, just give this bit.
Yeah.
And I think actually proof of mediumship, evidential proof that somebody is existing, they just told you what you said in the car on the way over here. That is the most profound door opening thing for people. Because then they're like, okay, now I believe this. And then they're open to like maybe expanding a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to get a little esoterical with you and kind of chat about some of these perceptions of like um off-planet beings and that communication and what your perception is of that, or have you had that experience? I don't know. What's your take on that topic?
Yes. So, I mean, am I going to get really esoteric and this isn't going to be out there on
Yeah.
YouTube, but
Oh, well, as
so,
much as
I
you want.
mean, I really am, I'm absolutely a believer in extraterrestrials, and especially in the last 5 years, it has been very, it's like we're getting towards this disclosure place, and even people that are spiritual and open are like, oh my god, they're everywhere. Like they're everywhere, they're here, like they're helping us, like keeping us from destroying ourselves and the planet, which is magical to me. I'm like, thank you very much. But I definitely know, when I go to do readings, that somebody is very, very ET. Like, I've got their guides coming in, and even though I'm not seeing it, sometimes I get it through my knowing. So it's like, okay, this person's, from a certain planet. But,
Mhm.
and that started, I think, maybe about 5 years ago, in increasing in frequency, but a lot of times they just channel as a collective, and they don't show me that because the person doesn't want to hear that, doesn't need to hear that, or it's not time for them to hear that. So I don't go down there. I don't go down the rabbit hole with anybody,
Yeah.
with I will just call them high frequency beings,
Mhm.
interdimensional, I guess. I don't go down the rabbit hole unless spirit tells me to. Then I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's like kind of so much crossover. Like, if I'm watching like Ancient Aliens and they pose these questions and I'm like, yeah, but they're leaving out spirit and they're leaving out like the channeling and the spirit communication. And sometimes it is one and the same?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that there's the ability for spirit to be visible or not visible. There's ability for um, beings that are here to be physical and then not, or invisible. I mean, there's so much to it.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that I've had many astral traveling experiences, particularly going through other lifetimes, doing like some cleanup work or processing or what have you, where I'm not on this planet. I'm like on another planet.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I'm aware of it. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. I remember the
Yeah.
first time I had one of those dreams where I really wasn't very as open to, it wasn't like I didn't think, I never thought we were just alone and there was, just humans, nobody
Mhm.
else in the whole entire solar system. It seems very like egocentric. Um, but I had this dream. I was a merman in a cave in the water, and I had lost my arm, and I had all of the feelings of the disappointment and unhappiness. And I was so upset because we were a community that contributed, and I wasn't able to contribute to the community in the way that I had formerly contributed. And I was really brokenhearted over it. And it wasn't, I was upset because I lost my arm and now I don't have an arm. It was because of my community. I couldn't serve my community. And that was one of my first ones where I was like, that was real and that wasn't on this planet. Whoa.
Yeah.
Profound.
And so was that like a dream or was that kind of like a waking?
That was an astral traveling
Okay.
experience.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was conscious.
Yeah.
I was in him, but conscious as Toby.
Oh, wow. That
Yeah,
is so cool.
it was really cool.
Yeah. Um, oh, I love that. And I think there's just so much we don't know
So
about
much.
all of it. What
So
advice would you give for people who are kind of open and practicing this kind of channeling, with or without like substances? I know sometimes people have really strong opinions on drugs as a part of this like experience, or staying sober and that being important. Do you have any advice for people navigating it on their own, or any kind of insight that can, I'm almost seeing like bumpers that can kind of help support somebody, but so, because I think it can be scary for a lot of people
yeah.
knowing what to trust, or even like just being afraid of their own perceptions of
Yes,
things
yes.
that they can't make sense of.
So, in all of my experience, and I've taught almost as long as I've been doing this because I'm a teacher by nature. And one thing is you got to clean up your own stuff.
Mhm.
And so, if you have boundary issues with humans, you're going to have boundary issues with spirit. It's just the same thing. It's like you're not going to turn around, and if people are walking all over you in the human world and you're not doing anything about it, you could have that same experience. So I think cleaning up doing your own work is really
Mhm.
important to stay as a clear channel. I'm definitely intention setting.
Yeah.
And if you are very fear based, it may not be for you,
Yeah.
because you are getting what you're putting out, and
Mhm.
you are attracting what you're putting out, and you want to get to a place where you're not fear based. But I think doing the work so that you can trust yourself and
Mhm.
your own perceptions. So
Mhm.
even if that looks like for a person, them learning their own innate and their own higher self and their
Mhm.
own intuitive processes,
Mhm.
um, I think that's important. And I also think that um, when you're going through it, one of the things that I always tell people is you've got to write stuff down, especially in the beginning,
Yeah.
because you're going to get stuff. I got so much stuff that was like, I mean, I used to dream 8 years in advance, just precognitively, like what was going to happen. But I would get so much stuff. And then I'd look back at my journal and I'd be like, oh my God, I forgot I even got that. And so that I think is really important, to kind of pay attention to what hits you get.
Mhm.
And then also maybe make it a practice,
Yeah.
which is really hard for me because I have ADHD. So I'm like, I don't know
Don't
what I'm going to be like in the next hour, let alone like tomorrow at the same
and like
time. So,
don't so many of us, like,
yes.
I remember when I was talking to Cindy about that, and she was saying how, like, a lot of us, I was, like, in
Both.
the same
Yeah.
vein, like, because we're processing things differently. So, if that's what it's called, because we're, like, not humaning in the same way or whatever, I
Yeah.
just feel like it's a common thing. And
Yeah.
it's like my dad pointed out. He's like, "You want your psychic to be, like, forgetful and, like, maybe not the best at doing human things because 'cause they're so good at,
Yes.
like, you know?"
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't worry about it because I can't tell somebody I'm getting ready to do a reading and I'll start not being able to talk. And I'm like, don't worry, this is good. you know, because they're taking over my voice. I
Yeah.
think about substances is I feel, for instance, I've done ketamine for fibromyalgia. I've had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue for really pretty much since the year after my dad died. And it has helped me immensely. And I'm also not actively autoimmune since the 2 years I've been doing ketamine.
Oh, wow.
And ketamine actually directly links me to higher frequency beings. And it is going to be different for every person. And I think a person needs to know what substances, even foods, because some
Mhm.
people food doesn't matter. Some
Mhm.
people it does, but what they put into their body or do that actually weakens their energy or auric field. And it's not going to be the same for every person. It's just about knowing yourself. Um, I mean, I know, for instance, I would say alcohol overall is gonna weaken most people's energy fields,
Mhm.
but I'm also not like anti-alcohol, although I am anti-alcohol and doing readings because I
Yeah.
learned that the hard way.
Oh.
Oh my God, I learned that the hard way. doing a group reading one time. I don't know, drinking
Oh,
wine. So I
funny.
don't do that anymore myself. But I also think psychedelics are a very different animal.
Mhm.
And I also would say that for, for instance, we're in Colorado, so pot is,
Oh.
I mean, everywhere all the time, and it has been forever.
Mhm.
I don't particularly, it doesn't do well for me, especially I have a lot of heart racing with it, so it causes me a lot of anxiety. But some people, it actually helps. Some people it hinders, and I think it's going to be the person, and then a
Yeah.
person needs to figure that out for themselves.
Yeah.
Just really
Yeah.
quickly, I think how you would know, people really do know in the back of their mind, they really do know this is good for me or this is not good for me. You might be doing it and it's not good for you, and that's fine too. But
Yeah.
it's like, just being real truthful for yourself with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think somebody who has had the experience like you, meeting other beings under the influence or whatever you want to call it, you have a different level of discernment.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
extremely empathic. I read that there's clear empathy now. I like it was like empathy, and then now they've added to the clairs, so now it's like clear empathy and clear tangency, which is really just psychometry. But
Okay.
I'm like, that's kind of cool, though. Okay, let's throw it in there.
Yeah.
I am extremely empathic and have been my whole life, and essentially, no matter what somebody's doing here,
Hmm.
I'm feeling what's behind here,
Yeah.
and so for me, I'm not going to say a spirit couldn't fool me. I'm sure they have before, maybe, uh, but I can feel your vibration and your intention,
Hmm.
no matter what your words are or what you're saying to me.
Yeah.
So that's helpful if you're energetically sensitive, because energy doesn't lie.
Yes. And that was one of my questions, is because I think sometimes when people are doing this work and kind of outside of the scope of reality and having discernment, how do we know when there's like a hack going on or a being isn't who they say? Or what are your thoughts about some of that? Is that just kind of come back to that grounded protection going into this work when you're going into a session like that or something? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So I probably would be, this is probably not a popular answer. I mean, truly, but I mean, I think for me, and what I've learned from spirit is truthful. So if somebody has an attachment or has an energy that is connected to them in some way, and I know this from personal experience of knowing people with this situation, that it is something that their soul is choosing to experience. Their
Mhm.
soul is adept. Their soul doesn't have to have that experience. They're choosing that experience for some reason for the individual. And it's
It's a choice.
usually for discernment, or maybe you needed to tighten up your boundaries, or maybe you've been um, smoking too much pot or whatever. And I'm not going to say smoking pot's bad, but say for that person that they
Yeah.
know it weakens their energy field and
Yeah.
it lets stuff
Yeah.
in. Maybe you're meant to clear your space more, your own frequency, and learn how to do that. It could be a lot of different reasons, but I always remind people when they're having an experience that is unwanted with uh, we'll just say an entity or a being. When you say the word entity, it makes it a negative connotation, and it's really
Yeah.
not a negative connotation. To me, it's not. But if you're having an unwanted experience, uh, it's not, you're not a victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing. It's more like, what am I learning from this? Let's go ahead and learn it so I can get rid of whatever this is.
Right, and from my experience, sometimes I'll say, "It's still taking up your energy." Like, it's still, so even if you feel like it's a good situation, or even like, I don't know, I'll use the example of like, when we moved into my house here, it was very much like a Beetlejuice experience. Like the people who had lived in this home were here for 40 years, raised their family. And so we were kind of moving in and like pulling up the shag carpeting and taking
Oh
down the
yeah.
wallpaper. And you could just feel their spirits like, no,
Oh,
like,
funny.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and there were just weird things that would happen. Like on my husband's calculator, there'd always be numbers in the morning because this was the space, this was his office, and he was an accountant. And so there was these things. And so for a while, it was kind of like funny or cute, or I just would like feel them around. And then I just had like an aha moment where I was like, you know what, this is still taking up attention and time and energy. And
Yeah.
I just needed to like talk to them and tell them this was our space now and that they could leave it be and this was no long, and kind of just had to have that authority.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good example in like you're in the driver's seat, you're in charge, anything that isn't serving you that you get to decide,
Yeah.
you can go and you get to say it. And from my experience, the spirit world is really respectful of
Yeah.
like what we say and what we intend.
Yeah, right. I do think intention is absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. And I think people don't often even know their own intentions. Like
Mhm.
they think they know their intentions, but if they're really looking, and also
Mhm.
whatever subconscious programming they might be running behind the scenes that
Yeah.
might feed into some of that.
Mhm.
But I definitely also know that there's a lot of people that are like, I don't, uh, so I remember an experience in which there was a dark entity. Um, it was an earth focused spirit. And I was tapping into it remotely for somebody, just the situation. And they didn't want to experience it, and that they were fascinated and drawn to it. And they were the type that watched back to back horror films, the worst things ever. Like I'm always like, whatever I'm watching, I'm putting into my consciousness and it could be used.
Yeah.
Like I could, because I watched this, I can now have this experience because I put it into my consciousness. So I'm always like, ooh, I don't want that in my consciousness. I stopped watching murder shows because of that, even though I really love them, like all the Datelines and all that, because it was just too much.
Yeah.
But I remember, there were substances involved. And I essentially remember telling the girl, that her significant other was not going to make a different choice around this. She could make a different choice and move out, but it's not going anywhere because
Mhm.
it was connected to him. So I do think if you have a situation with something unwanted, you need to look inside and see
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Um,
also all the haunted places,
mhm.
just a reminder that you absolutely can pick up things in different places, for people. Uh,
Yeah, and that was actually my next question is what's your take on ghosts or haunted places? What advice would you give somebody if they came to you and they were like, "My house is haunted. I feel a dark spirit." And I guess it could be a few things. It could be attached to their partner as your last story. It could be, but like generally, what advice would you have for somebody coming to you for that?
yes, I don't work in hauntings and I don't work in clearings and I never have. So just not
Mhm.
saying that I'm an expert. I'm more good at reading why it's happening, what the sole reason is, what's going on. And so if I was tapping in for somebody, I would try to see what the lesson is, what they're learning, and why it's there. And and if spirit's willing to tell me what needs to be done to shift that energy out or to be able to um, acclimate it or whatever they're doing. Sometimes, and this is so esoteric, but sometimes it is you are experiencing a fragment of yourself, like
That you want that you should look at and heal.
right, that you're acclimating into you have chosen at a soul level to bring this energy in and acclimate it because it's an alignment in some way of healing in this lifetime, or there's some overlap. And so it might seem external to you because it's like a man and I'm a woman, and or whatever. I've had two conscious experiences of that. One acclimating, like in my solar plexus, acclimating an alcoholic male that I was in a past life, And two, after I had a hysterectomy, acclimating a Welsh female that had a stillborn. Uh,
Mhm.
and she was in my energy field for a while. And it was just, I knew I was processing it and it was a part of me. So there's so much more to it. Like there could be so much more to it. But really, if we are actually looking for the answer, it's always looking within and figuring out why that's happening. Like
Yeah.
what it's bringing up for you,
Yeah.
for somebody. But and I want to go back to the part about fear
Mhm.
is that there's no reason to have fear. And if you have fear, you likely will have experiences drawn to you that will reflect that fear.
Mhm.
So that part's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, hard, like, I'm sure you just experienced trying to break through and trying to tell a client something like this, and they just don't wanna hear it. What do you do in those situations? Like, just kinda glean just, like, plant those seeds, leave those there?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then they'll hear it likely because they were drawn to me for a reason.
Mm.
And they'll likely, those seeds will likely be like later, they'll be like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, I
yeah,
remember, or spirit will bring it back up to them. Remember
yeah,
what Toby said? Yeah. Okay, I get it now,
yeah.
not taking it personally.
And do you have clients coming back for the clarity on what now they get it, they have that aha moment, and then do
Yeah.
they come back for some more,
Yeah,
insight?
I do have
Yeah.
some, especially people, there's some people that like to check in, um, like soul path type stuff,
Mhm,
just seeing where they're at. Sometimes I think one of the most frustrating readings for me is when somebody is in a waiting pattern and they're
mhm,
trying to figure out how they can move ahead and they're not
mhm.
meant to be moving ahead, and trying to relay that to people. Like
Yeah,
you gotta chill a little bit. It's not time for you
yeah,
to, that door's not open and you're trying to open it. It's locked. So
yeah.
and then I'll tap into like, okay, if I can get time, like the time or whatever timing, um, which always is subject to change, but uh, I do get repeat people sometimes. Yeah.
And, this is a little off topic, but it just kind of came to me when you were talking. I think this is like a collective 9-year with 2025. Do you have anything to say about that?
I'm ready. I'm actually also one of those people that's been frustrated of wanting to move ahead.
Yeah.
One of the things they've shown me is that I'm going to trans channel.
Mm,
And that was actually part of the ketamine journey for me, the beginning of that, because I actually, I'll just say this really quickly, spoke to the doctor, and it was my guide speaking to the doctor. And I have it actually on video because I was videoing myself at the time just to see what I did. And
'cause
it
who knew you were
was
gonna just channel?
like, he's going like this, and I'm present, and he's talking to the doctor, and he says, I know you. And this is like the second time I met this guy. And he says, yeah, I'm so and so.
Yeah.
And I said, I know you. And I'm going like this and scratching my beard.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, and then he's like introduces the staff out there, and I'm like, no, I know you. And then I chortle, like make this like really rotund laugh. And then I'm like, holy shit, it was just totally, I was not controlling my vocal cords. So and I actually knew when I first started this work that it was likely that I was going to trans channel. And that was like, because they could move me, like,
Mm,
and I still actually can be conscious. I'm not like actually out.
yeah.
And I've been waiting for that to happen. I'm really excited about it. Like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. And so I'm one of those people that are like, let's go. And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, but we're in a 9-year, and this isn't about going forward. This is about clearing
Mhm.
stuff up, releasing stuff that's not serving you. I'm like, we've been doing that forever.
Again.
Can we just go? But I'm also coming into a 3-year personally. Interestingly enough, I looked that up last night. I don't know why, but
Oh,
in March I'll be coming into a 3-year, which is like all creative stuff, and like, so I'm excited about that part. But I
okay.
think the 9-year is a lot of purging, a lot
Okay.
of endings.
Yeah. and just people like I'm also in a personal 9 year, so I'm buckling up
Oh,
this year. But so it's like double whammy, but I'm just trying to say to myself, we're just gonna self-care
yeah,
and like
yes,
and do the work, but be gentle because it's gonna be a lot of processing, I think. So
yes,
mm,
yeah. And I think another thing that I really learned from spirit, and not necessarily from loved ones in spirit or what have you, but it has never been about anything else but self-compassion
yeah.
and self-love. It's like one of the biggest things that we're coming to learn. Obviously,
Mhm.
loving everybody else, but self-compassion and self-love is one of the hardest things for humans to achieve. And even if you achieve it for a little bit, you're like right back to, I should have done this. Why didn't I do this? Judge, 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 judge.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, I'm so excited to tune into some of your channeling maybe coming up and like, because I think there's just so much wisdom shared,
Yeah,
and especially to find like good channelers or channel or whatever you call them, just to get some of that wisdom and insight.
yeah, yeah. Do you watch Bashar at all?
Yeah,
Yeah, I do
yeah,
love Bashar.
yeah.
Bashar always cracks me up.
My dad loves the Z's. Do you
Who
know
is that?
that? Lee Harris, he
Oh
channels
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Z's. Yeah.
Yes.
So he's from out here, I guess. He lived in this area for a while. So my dad's always like, "Oh, did you hear what the Z's said?" And
Yeah,
he'd kind of moved on to them from Cryon, but I just find it so fascinating, and
yeah,
I think as a collective, we're just hungry for more of
yeah,
this insight that's coming in these through
yeah,
these channels. So
yeah. Because
I can't
we've been
wait
like
to, yeah.
stuck in this, and they're like, oh,
Mhm.
by the way, here's all the things you actually can do, and you're like, oh my God,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
wow.
Yeah.
So I think it is ushering us into the next phases of humanity, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I'll keep an eye out and follow you on social media for some of that. And then also, you're a teacher. So
Oh yeah.
people can go to your website and see what offerings you have. I think you're always, from what I see, you're always kind of offering something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So I do teach, and I've had my God Spirit program that I've done, which is a 6 week program that's really meant to help you connect to yourself, your guides, your loved ones in spirit. Um, to actually, what does it look like to be psychic daily? All of these things. Also, managing empathy, psychic tools. And I'm actually writing that into a online course. So it's sorry, a PDF course. So I will also be having that available where you don't have to take it live. So that's coming soon.
Cool.
And I do teach all sorts of different other topics. So there's usually a class that's available. Like I think the one I've got going on now is I hang on, I can't remember it. Soul themes. Sorry, I almost said contracts, but I changed the word contracts because
Yeah.
the contract has too much of a
It
connotation.
does. Isn't
Um,
that funny when you say it? It brings up a different feeling.
but oh,
Yeah.
soul themes,
Oh, good,
themes.
good.
Yes. I love teaching that. And I also will probably be starting events again, live events. And I also have Zoom. I do Zoom readings and Zoom group readings events, sometimes bigger groups, sometimes small groups, which everybody gets a reading. And my website is mediumtobi.com.
Awesome. And I think that's so great to have a PDF written out too, because I think when people are developing, it's like suddenly you're blown open and you're so hungry for like authentic, high integrity information. And there's just a lot out there.
Well, there's a
And
lot.
so the fact that you're doing this and people can kind of go somewhere and find it and anchor into some truth is just so wonderful and a great access point too, it sounds like
Yeah.
for people.
I'm excited
Um,
about it because it also is able to offer a 6 week course because it is my teaching guide that I give to. So every time I'm doing this class, you get this guide that is right along with what I'm teaching in the whole class. But it's like being able to offer it for a lot lower of a price too. So making it affordable and accessible.
That's great. And are you also writing? You're writing a lot, it sounds like this year. So, um,
Finally,
what else are you writing? Are you
yeah.
working on a memoir?
Yes, I'm working on a memoir. So I'm working on my, and it's really, so it is partially my story. That's just really the first part because people always want to know my story, and I think you always do. But that is like maybe the first section, but the rest of it is the stories because the stories, the murders, the suicides, the overdoses, the kids, the fur babies, like just so many stories that stand out to me that I feel like are so touching and heartwarming for people to read. And maybe somebody doesn't can't afford a reading or doesn't want to get a reading, but maybe they might want to read the book.
Yeah.
So and also people, I also feel like when I was developing, I read every Medium book there was. It
Yeah,
was just
me
like,
too. I was gonna say there's so
yeah,
much to learn
yeah,
from reading a memoir that a medium writes
yeah,
because it's such a unique unfoldment and it really does look different to everybody. So you can learn so much from just one person's experience,
yeah.
you know?
I definitely think
Yeah.
that too, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your wisdom. And I'll put all the links to everything on this page so everybody can find you really easily. And I highly, highly recommend checking Toby out. Go to the website, follow her on social media. As far as high integrity and quality mediums, they don't get better. So
Oh,
thanks
thank
so much.
you. Appreciate you. Thanks
Yes.
for having me.
Thanks so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.